What's up, Maniacs? My name is Mex. I'm a wrestling fan, a wrestling enthusiast, a WrestleManiac, if you will. And today we are doing part two of the four-part series looking at the biggest black stars in wrestling over the years. October in the UK, Black History Month, and even on this channel, we always celebrating Black history. We're always looking at either the history or today's wrestlers through our show Wrestle Extra on a Tuesday. This is Black History Month, so we're going into the archives and we're talking about the stars of yesterday. And of course, I have got my guy Earl here, aka Knowledge, dropping that knowledge on the people, all about Black wrestling. Earl, how you doing today?
I'm good, Max. How you been, bro?
Yeah, I'm all good. We loved the Rocky Johnson talk. We're back again to talk about the star of the 80s.
Star of the
Now,
80s.
Just before we get into it, what is your general opinion on wrestling in the 80s?
Wrestling in the 80s, I think, is probably at its most artistic, really.
Yeah.
And also it was the beginning of that big boom period that we're still experiencing a bit now, where it be from Vince McMahon killing the territories and creating that global juggernaut that is WWE, or Mid-South promotions like really creating some cutting edge television, or even Jim Brockett promotions really creating really good pro wrestling. I mean, it's a fabulous decade for people who want to go and watch some just amazing pro wrestling.
Cool. So, of course, we are all about Black wrestling on this particular series. So, we're going to get into it in just a second. Guys, again, the Rocky Johnson video is out. So, check that out on the Black Wrestling Matters and the Black History Month playlist that's on my channel. And of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you get notified every time I drop a new video. But without further ado, we're going to get into it. Earl, let us know who was the biggest black star of the 80s.
The biggest black star of the 1980s, bar none, was the Junkyard Dog.
Come on, I was waiting for that name.
I love the Junkyard Dog. Awful wrestler. This is the worst. But I'm a huge fan of the Junkyard Dog. I really am. He was this a superstar. He really was. So I'm actually really looking forward to talking about the dog. I'm such a mark for him. I really am. So where do you want to start?
So yeah, let us know maybe about his start in wrestling, where he wrestled, championships he won, if any, maybe his biggest feud as well.
Well, yeah, his real name was Sylvester Ritter, and he, Sylvester. My uncle's name's Sylvester. Sylvester Ritter was his name, and he actually got a degree in history randomly. That memory serves me correctly. He's got a degree in history, which is, I say randomly because in the WWF, when you watch his promos, he came across like such a goof, but he was a super smart guy. But he got his start in Stampede Wrestling. Stu Hart gave him his first big break. He liked him because Dog was a football player, and Stu Hart loved big, muscular men because he liked to stretch them in the dungeon. That was his thing. He'd get these big men who were so tough, and he'd get them to the dungeon and he'd stretch them, and he'd make them scream, in pain because he'd be pulling on their arms and putting them behind their heads and all sorts of stuff.
When we say stretch, are we talking about like physically stretch, or are we talking about push someone to the limits?
Stu Hart was a submission wrestling specialist, and he would get these guys that would always criticize pro wrestling, and he would take them down and he'd put them in holes that they could never get out of. And that is some of the things that the Hart kids always say, was that they could hear the screams from the basement because they knew that their dad was doing awful things to people downstairs. And you know what, these wrestlers now, the ones that were like Chris Jericho would have been in there. You hear these guys talk and it's like he couldn't think of anything worse. Really, those moves that don't even exist anymore, he'd put you in those moves, But Junkyard Dog was one of those guys, and he wasn't any good. He really wasn't any good. He was.
Was he like Great Khali, bad or worse?
No, because you know what? I've seen Junkyard Dog have good matches, depending on who he was in the ring with. I've never seen Khali have a good match at any point in history. So I suppose he wasn't that bad, but I mean, he wasn't any good. But you know what? He was super charismatic. I mean, this guy was just a superstar. I mean, he looked like one. He had a great physique. When people think the Junkyard Dog, I think they think of the guy in the WWF that was a bit round and stuff. But in his day, he looked kind of like Bill Goldberg. Like, you know, when Goldberg was in his prime, he was a big roided up guy, and you know, he looked like a badass. Like, you know, so he worked in Stampede, and Jake Roberts was up there, and who else was up? Bad News Allen was up there as well, and Jake. He told Junkyard Dog, he said, my dad is going to work for this new promotion in Louisiana, because Bill Watts is starting up his own thing. You know, they need guys. You want to come down? So they went down there, and that's when, when he worked in Stampede Wrestling for Stu Hart, his name was Big Daddy Ritter. He was a womanizer. Yeah, he's a womanizer. And,
wait, that was his character or in real life? Or
no, that was his character, Big Daddy Ritter. He was supposed to be like some sort of like pimp, I guess you could say, like
Godfather-ish.
And yeah, not that outlandish, but like, you know, he's a heel, and you know, he was that kind of thing. But he went down there, and Bill Watts saw him and automatically knew he was a football player, saw the size of him, and was just like, you know, this guy is like incredible. And Bill Watts knew he had something special, and from the moment he met JYD, he knew that that's the guy right there. He was he put a rocket to the back to Dog's back, and he was a superstar literally within months of being in Mid-South Wrestling. The whole act was created by Bill Watts. Bill Watts was a promoter. He was a big wrestling star, and he used to run the Louisiana territory with Leroy McGurk, and they had a falling out, and he took Jim Ross, and you know, they split the town, and Bill Watts started his own Mid-South Wrestling promotion. He had young stars. They had theme music. They didn't have theme music back then in wrestling. Okay. So yeah, that was big stuff back then. And it was real music too. Like, it wasn't this in-house music. Like Junkyard Dog's theme song was Another One Bites the Dust was Junkyard Dog's theme song, and he had the dog collar around his neck, and he had the chain, and you know, he come out, and you know, I know you're going to ask me at some point who I can compare Dog to, and I can't, because there was nobody in wrestling like the Junkyard Dog at that time. There was no one in wrestling now that is as over as he was in Louisiana. Even in that period, the only guys I can compare it to is the Von Erichs. Those were the two most over acts in wrestling. You could go Hogan, Flair, Race. None of the guys in pro wrestling at that time were as over as a Junkyard Dog. And you know, Bill Watts knew that if you get a guy and you push him like a star, black people will come to the show. When Dog was on top, at least half the audience was black. And they lived and died by him, because he was one of their own, and he wasn't a fool. He was never portrayed as being a stereotype or whatever. He was a badass, and he always beat up the white wrestlers. And anytime he was ever attacked, he'd always come back on his own, and he'd do it by himself. And it's something that a lot of people can learn, even now in wrestling, how to promote and capture the black audience, I feel. So yeah, that's the start of the Junkyard Dog.
What were some of his like biggest moments, biggest accolades in his career?
The biggest moment for Dog was the feud with Michael P.S. Hayes. So Michael Hayes, the Freebirds, they blinded him. They put hair removal cream in his eyes, and they blinded him, and he went home, and he stayed at home for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they have him on TV. They'd have him on TV doing interviews where he couldn't see. And he had his daughter Latoya was born, and he told everyone at home that he hadn't seen her. He couldn't see her, and you know, people were just like, they were sending him money.
Kayfabe was kayfabe.
Yes.
Like, oh,
yes.
That would be so good to kind of see that play out now, sort of thing. But I know the internet.
Moxley did it. John Moxley did it when he was blind. He had an eye patch. He wore the eye patch all the time.
Everywhere,
Everywhere he wore the eye patch. But Junkyard Dog never left his house. No one ever saw him. He stayed at home, and those people, they hated Michael Hayes and the Freebirds. They wanted their blood, and riots at Mid-South Wrestling were the norm. Those people, they lived and died by a lot of those pro wrestlers, and JYD was definitely at the top of the tree. But so the biggest feud, so they do this, so he's blind, and Bill Watts announces that he's going to be here at this, I don't remember where it was, but so he comes out and he's got his glasses on and someone's leading him to the ring. And now if that happened, there was an angle coming up, but back then, people thought he was going to announce his retirement. Anyway, the Freebirds come down, they come into the ring, and I don't know what was going to happen, but before anything could happen, this fan jumps into the ring with a gun and he aims at Hayes, and he's about to shoot Hayes.
A real gun.
It's a real gun. Like, Mid-South was different. They thought it was real, bro. That's how good Bill Watts' TV was.
That's mad.
They weren't playing, and he was going to shoot Hayes. And I remember Junkyard Dog said he saw the gun come out, and because he was supposed to be blind, he couldn't do anything. So he stood there, and the security came and grabbed the guy, and they took him off. And when security would take the wrestlers in Mid-South, they take them to the back. And truth is that the wrestlers used to beat the crap. Yeah, they used to have, Bill Watts was a sadistic man, and he used to let the wrestlers just knock the crap out of these fans for taking liberties. And so they did the match, JYD against Michael Hayes at the Superdome, and until WrestleMania. What was the WrestleMania with Undertaker and Brock? What was that number?
30.
So that was 2014. So they did that match in 1981. That was the highest attended wrestling show in Louisiana until 2014 when they did WrestleMania. They did 29,000 people, and I believe they had nitros in Louisiana. They had WWE shows in Louisiana too, but I'll explain after. But yeah, so that was the big feud that Junkyard Dog had. He had memorable feuds with Ted DiBiase. The whole formula with the Junkyard Dog was that his tag team partners would turn on him. And that was the basis of most feuds back in the day. Hulk Hogan's partners would always turn on him. Junkyard Dog's partners would always turn on him. Mr. Wonderful turned on Junkyard Dog. They had a match at the Superdome. Ted DiBiase, best friend, turned on him. They had a match at the Superdome. So it was just an ongoing thing, really. But like I said, he was never that good. But put him in the ring with the right person, and he could do enough. But it was the interviews. He was so charismatic, and he was likable. And I think what it is that I think AEW have got it now, but I think that back then, especially in local territories, I think people felt that they knew the wrestlers. I think that they felt that they knew the Junkyard Dog. They knew Kerry Von Erich, which is why they literally lived and died by these people. It's like Kerry Von Erich was the biggest thing in Texas for years and years and years, and the Junkyard Dog was the biggest draw that Louisiana had ever seen up to this day now. The WWE goes to Louisiana, they don't draw like Bill Watts did back in the day with the dog on top, But the problem with JYD was that he lived really fast, and he was earning a lot of money. He was earning about $200,000 a year in 1981, and I don't know what that would be nowadays, but that's a lot of money. That's I don't know what that would be with inflation, but that's a lot of money in 1981. And he did that. He did that for years and years and years. But he was a big party guy. He was big into the cocaine, and years later he was big into crack too. And he got really big. And I remember because Bill Watts would say, he's getting bigger because these wrestlers in Mid-South, they're getting much bigger, so he's got to get bigger. That was the excuse for Dog getting fat. And but he still drew. I tell you what, him and Bill Watts, they had a feud with the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette. And it was the biggest feud in the history of that territory. That whole loop, they sold out every show on the loop. And it was called The Last Stampede. Bill Watts and the Junkyard Dog. Bill Watts had come out of retirement, first match in years, to get rid of Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express, all right? Because they were so hated in Mid-South. People just wanted to see the back of Cornette and those dastardly Midnight Express. And they promoted this match as the last time Bill Watts would ever wrestle. And because the TV was localized, they promote whatever show in whatever town as the only match. But because the TV was localized, everyone got their own TV. So there was actually Last Stampedes all over the place. But wherever you watched it, you'd think that the show coming to your town was the only one. But like I said, they sold out 20,000, 22,000, 24,000 seats all over Mid-South just to see Watts and Junkyard Dog beat the crap out of Jim Cornette and put Jim Cornette in his mum's wedding dress or whatever it was. So
bro, it sounds like, even, you know, with his actual wrestling shortcomings, like from everything you've said, he looks like someone that can definitely tell a story. And especially at a time where maybe, like you're saying, everyone thought this was some real stuff happening. If he can carry that story through even aspects of his own life, then of course you're going to be hooked. Of course it's going to be a draw.
Yeah, like I said, he wasn't any good, but he was good enough, and with the right person he could really, you know, he had the Mid-South, it was called the North America Championship. He had that 4 times, and he wasn't the only black guy that had it, because Bill Watts would always promote black wrestlers as his top guys just because of the market he was in. He had Butch Reed was a big star for him, Ernie Ladd, Thunderbolt Patterson, Ray Candy. He always had black wrestlers as his top guys. You know what? Bill Watts, as far as advocates for black wrestlers in the history of American wrestling, Bill Watts is probably the number one in terms of the amount of black wrestlers they actually pushed. However, Bill Watts was pretty racist himself, and but he didn't care because he just wanted to make money. But I met Dave Meltzer years ago, and I asked him about Bill Watts because I admire something about Bill Watts that fascinates me, because his TV show was so good. If you ever watch it, it's like AEW now. It's such a good TV show. And I asked him, I said, how racist was Bill Watts? Because Dave used to know him. And he said, he was horrendously racist. Like, he was the worst. And I was like, that just shows you how much he didn't care about this, how much money he wanted, really,
First,
money was everything to Cowboy Bill Watts. It didn't matter who he had to push, but he'd done it. He went to the WWF, and he was number 2 babyface. Vince got him, despite all the problems that he had, because these problems were known in wrestling, that Junkyard Dog had issues. But you know what? I don't want to say everyone had issues back then, but it wasn't enough to. I mean, WWF, those guys were, doing all sorts anyway. Vince didn't care, so he got Junkyard Dog, and he was actually number 2 babyface for a while. He was Hogan's understudy, and the problem is, though, he just wasn't reliable. He wouldn't show up. His marriage was breaking down as well. He broke up his wife. She went into a mental institution, and she escaped, and she kidnapped his kids, and he went to get the kid, and he shot her brother, who was a police officer. There's a lot of craziness going on with JYD at that time. And you know what? When he went to WWF, he did really well. He had the IC first ever WrestleMania. He had the Intercontinental title match with Greg Valentine, which was a really heavily promoted match. At the time, it wasn't a good match. It wasn't a good match at all. But it was there. People cared about it. But the change in him compared to Mid-South, it was a totally different wrestler. And he got to a point where when he went back to Louisiana, even teaming with Hulk Hogan, they did no business, because I think, especially black people in that time period, I think they saw JYD as a bit of a sellout, because he made himself look really stupid on TV. There was a show in Oakland, California, which is a heavily black area. He wrestled Terry Funk in the main event, and they were cheering Terry Funk and booing him. That just shows you what happened to him and that decline. But he died in '98. He had a car crash. But once again, as far as charismatic wrestlers, and as far as most over wrestlers, not only black wrestlers, but wrestlers in history, short term, he only had maybe a 4 or 5 year run being this over, but he's definitely up there in terms of just definitely one of the most over wrestlers ever. Like,
mate, I've spoken to yourself now, other guys, within trying to do this videos about Black history over the years and stuff, and they're all on my channel, and every time someone's mentioning JYD, it's always the same stuff in terms of just how excellent he was, despite his wrestling wasn't that great. So, you know, there's clearly some good bits, although, you know, it kind of didn't end maybe how it should have after, you know, getting to WWF and the tragedy that, you know, ended his life. But no, it's excellent to see another star that, you know, we've ticked off the list, best in the 80s. In the next episode, guys, are going to be. He
definitely wasn't the best in the 80s, but he was definitely the biggest for that period.
Biggest for black wrestling in that time. So yeah, I think we all know in terms of when it comes to in ring, you know, the names that were thriving at that time. So
he had good matches with Ric Flair.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have too, but you know,
Flair's awesome. So yeah, put any one of us in the ring with Flair, and we will probably shine. But nah, I appreciate you coming through, Earl, dropping some knowledge on JYD. Guys, let us know down below in the comments what your favorite fact or story from that little chapter of you know, that Earl gave us. Let us know what you think about JYD. Thoughts and feelings down below in the comments. Like I said, I'll be wearing merch from other Black wrestlers, Black media personnel. Today I'm wearing my guy, Black Wrestling Alliance, Someone Like Me, obviously with our traditional kind of Africa colors, running through it. Again, links, everything down in the description. Support Black Wrestling Alliance, everything they're doing over there on their channel, their Instagram and stuff like that. Oh, thanks for coming through again today, man.
No problem, man. Anytime.
Really appreciate it. JYD, gosh, like I said, the stories never change.
I've got loads. I've got loads of Junkyard Dog stories.
We will definitely have to spin back around and, you know, touch on this again. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, please like the video, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. WrestleManiac UK signing out, and I'll see you soon.